Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. This week's tutorial, we are diving into creating this little darling cardigan, and I call it the little darling because it's just so squishy and so divine. If you guys are new here, my name is Karen. I love all things to do with crafting, with crochet, and I'm always delighted to share my ideas and designs and projects with you guys. And if you're not new here, welcome back, and it's always great to hang out with you. So we're going to create this beautiful little cardigan. I am making this for approximately 6 to 12 months. And there will be a sizing chart that you can access in the tutorial. I'll leave a link for it as well in the description box down below if you're making yours for a slightly younger child or a slightly older child. Now, what I always recommend when making baby items, think about the time of year that the little one is being born and when you realistically think that they are going to wear this garment. So, for example, if you have a baby that's born maybe at the end of May and you're making a newborn cardigan, if it turns into a really, really hot summer, that child is going to outgrow that cardigan by the time September or October comes around. So I would recommend making it for like a 6 to a 12 month old. So for example, I'm making this one for my sister-in-law who is having a niece or a nephew for me. And the baby's being born at the end of September. So it's already at the end of fall. And so I know that there's going to be a good 6 months throughout fall and winter. So I actually made this size, like I said, for a 6 to 12 month old child. And that way, even if it's a little big when they're first born, they've got about 6 months of growing that they can grow into this and use it throughout the end of fall and winter. Because babies, when they're first born, they're doing a lot of growing in the early months. So a little something to keep in mind. Now, I use this beautiful True Boo yarn by a Lion brand. It is a lightweight number 3 yarn, and I used that crunched single crochet stitch, which you saw a few tutorials back. As long as you know how to do the single crochet and your slip stitch, you can create this just lovely cushy texture. And I find it just gives it a little bit more of a coziness. And the fact that this True Boo yarn is bamboo just makes it divine for a baby item. And then we just used a little bit of white to create a trim. And there you have it. So this is created using the square yoke raglan method. So you can kind of see the raglan seams there. I have done a crochet lesson on how to create your yokes. Many of you have loved that crochet quick chat all about how to create the yoke for any of your sweaters. So I've done the lesson on the square yoke. I've also done one on the round yoke. And this is actually I would say our second project creating a cardigan using the square yoke. And I'll leave a link for the video of the other one, which was the Pretty in Puffs cardigan. Also, that one was done for a toddler, and I'll leave a link for that. And then more recently, probably about a month or two ago, I also recently did a baby cardigan, again, around the 6 month mark, using the round yoke method. So a few of you have loved the lesson, but were asking me, can you actually take us step by step to an actual project? And so here you are. So now we've got a couple of projects to go with that lesson. And this one just takes a little bit more patience because, like I said, using those slip stitches with the single crochet just takes a little bit more time, a little bit more patience. But I think worth every minute of it. I think you're going to love the texture. You're going to love how cozy it is. And by the way, you can make this for an adult as well. Just remember to refer to the sizing chart. So I say, without further ado, let's talk about materials you're going to need to begin. And then we're going to get started on creating our beautiful little darling cardigan. Okay, so let's talk about everything you're going to need to create your cardigan. Let's start off right away. You are going to need a sizing chart, most likely if you don't have the child close by. And you can download this chart off of the website at crochetcrafty.com under the tools page. And so this is our baby infant crochet garment sizing chart. And it's got everything you need to know. And so because I'm making this for a newborn, they grow so quickly in those first 3 months. So I'm not going to bother making it for 0 to 3 months. I'm going to go right up and make it for 6 months. So you're going to need this chart. You will need a piece of paper and a pen, and of course, a measuring tape. And the yarn I'm going to be using is this lovely True Boo yarn by Lion Brand. And it is 100% rayon from bamboo. And I've made a baby blanket from this as well. And I use this a lot in the Freedom Shawl. For those of you that are following in our Shall We Crochet series, I use some of that yarn in that project as well. And it's just divine. It comes in a 100-gram ball, which has 241 yards or 221 meters. And the hook size they recommend for this project is a 4mm hook, but I'm actually going to go up a little wee bit in hook size, and I'm going to be using a 4.5mm hook, which is also known as a G or a size 7. Okay? As always, make sure that you're going to have a yarn needle on hand to sew in any ends at the end, and of course, a pair of scissors to snip your yarn. So let's get talking about our measurements so that we can start stitching it up. Okay, so the main measurement you're going to want to get right off the bat is the measurement that's known as back of neck or the neck width. Okay, so again, you're going to refer to your trusty chart and you're going to find neck width, and then you're going to go across to the age range you're making it for. So again, I'm making it for 6 months, and I wouldn't even mind even going up to 12 months. So if I follow my neck width here, for 6 months, the neck width is 3 1/4 inches or 8.5 centimeters. And if you go up to the top end of that, you'll have 3.5 inches to 9 centimeters. And actually, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go right to the top end of that age bracket. So I know that I have 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters that I have to deal with. So 3.5 or 9 centimeters. Okay. So that's the first thing we need to have on hand. And for those of you that have never seen the square yoke crochet quick chat tutorial, it's the lesson on how to figure out how many stitches you need. I would strongly recommend you going to watch that if you're making a different size than I am. I kind of explain the methodology, but once you watch that tutorial, you'll be able to make it for any size, even for adults. And the reason why it's so important is depending on the type of yarn you use, the number of stitches I'm going to use here may be different than yours. Like this is considered a lightweight number 3 yarn. So if you're using a medium 4 weight yarn, for example, you're going to need less stitches. So if you use the same number of stitches that I do with a lightweight yarn, your project is going to be larger. So it's really important to understand how to construct your yoke based on the yarn that you're using. Okay, so for right now, all I want to focus on is 3.5 inches. Now for me, I've already done the measurements using this yarn, and I know that I need to chain up 18 stitches. Okay, so that's what's going to give me my 3.5 inches. Okay, once you have this measurement, now we can figure out how many stitches we're going to need to create our yoke. So this is a square yoke. It's going to go around the neck, okay? And remember, it's a cardigan, so we're actually going to leave a little opening here. So back of the neck is here, so we know that's 18 stitches, okay? And now here, we divided by 2, so 18 divided by 2 is 9 on each side. Now, because it's a cardigan, a lot of times people will deduct 1 stitch because later on you're going to do a collar or a trim. So we're going to actually make this 8 stitches. Okay. So how you work the sleeve opening or the armholes, which are here. So this is the back and this is the front where the chest is, okay? Normally you will take this number here, one of the panels, you have 8, and then you add an additional half of what this number is. So half of 8 is 4, okay? So my armhole should have 12 stitches, okay? So again, I'm going to take one of these panel numbers, so it's 8, and then I'm going to add half of this number. So in this case, it's 4, and I have 12 stitches. So what do we have? The back of the neck is going to get 18 stitches. Each armhole is going to get 12 stitches, and each panel in the front is going to get 8. Okay, so these are the number of stitches we need to create that first opening for the neck. Now, don't forget, we're going to create corners here. So for each corner, we're going to need to add an additional stitch. Okay, so you're going to add an additional 4 altogether. So here's how you're going to know how many initial chains to stitch up to create your yoke. So we're going to take the back, which is 18. We're going to take each armhole, which is 12 and 12. There's 2 armholes, plus the 2 panels in the front. So 8 and 8 is 16. And then don't forget, we've got 4 additional stitches for our corners here. And we're going to add all of these up. 2, 6. And in total, we've got 62 stitches. So these are the number of stitches we're going to need to create our initial neck opening. Now, just before we get started, let's just be aware of the next measurement you're going to need. You're going to need 2 more. Okay, so that's the first thing, the number of stitches. The next measurement you're going to need later on is the chest measurement and the back to waist measurement. And this is all for creating the body. Later we'll talk about the sleeves themselves, okay? So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to find my chest measurement and I'm going to go right across, and I know I need 18 inches or 45.5 centimeters. So I'm going to write that down. 18 inches or 45.5 centimeters, okay? And the other one I'm going to take is the back to waist. And so that measurement back to waist, that's basically the back of the neck all the way till you hit the waist. That's going to be the length of your cardigan. So back to waist, I'm going to go across the way here. And that's going to be 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. So I'm going to place that here, 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. So I'm going to save that for a little bit. Okay, so I've got these 2 in my back pocket, these 2 measurements. I figured out my number of stitches, so let's begin creating our yoke. Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook. And you're going to start up by chaining 62. If you're following along exactly with me and with the same yarn weight as I am. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, 2. Okay, so I've got my 62 chains. I was careful not to stitch too tightly. Okay, so something that looks like that. And so for the first row, we are going to use single crochet stitches. So because I want to maintain my number of 62, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to chain 1 more. Okay. And then we're going to create row number 1. So because like I said, we're using single crochet stitches, I'm going to skip the first one and I'm going to go into the second stitch and I'm going to place a single crochet. Remember that we never count the loop that's on the hook. Now I'm going to do something a little different here. Instead of just going in through the front of the stitch, I'm just going to turn the chain over and see how there's back bumps there. I'm going to work into the back bumps of this first chain, and it's just going to give me a nice little finished edge around the collar. Now we will be doing a little bit of a collar, but I just still like the look of that finished look. So I'm going to turn that over and into the second stitch, 1 and 2. I'm going to pick up that back bump there. You're going to have to help it along there. Just like that. By the way, if this is too finicky for you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just going in through the front of the chains. This is just something I like to do for certain projects. So I'm single crocheting. And then that's what you're going to do all the way down the row here. You're just going to pick up the next back bump and single crochet. Now, as much as I adore this yarn, it actually is divine and it's beautiful for baby projects. Some of you that have seen my Sunshine baby blanket, it was completely made out of this yarn. It is delightful and divine for baby projects especially. It is a little bit on the splitty side, so that's the only thing. Once in a while it can be a little bit annoying, but if you can just hang in there, I promise you the final result, you will be so happy with it. So I am going to battle through going into the back bumps here of each stitch and single crocheting, and I will meet you at the end of row number 1. And like I said, if you want to go in through the front, you go ahead and do that. Just wanted to show you, see it, when you go into the back bumps, it just gives you a nice little finished edge like that. All right. So 1 into each stitch, and I'll meet you at the end. You should still have 62 stitches when you finished row 1. Okay, so I've done my 62 stitches, my single crochets, and my row 1 looks like this. Okay, and you can see it's a nice finished edge there. And now we're going to go on to row number 2, and this is where we're actually going to create the shape of our square yoke. Now, some people do it right away inside that first chain. Sometimes I do it that way. Sometimes I like to have this first row of single crochet stitches. So we are going to be using that crunched single crochet stitch. If you have seen that tutorial, you will remember that I alluded to this project. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our work. And into this very first stitch here, right there, you're going to place a single crochet. Now before I proceed, we want to remember that the number of stitches we need before we get to our first corner in our square is 8. So we want to make sure that we have 8 stitches worked. So in order to work the crunched single crochet, you're going to place a single crochet in the first stitch. Then you're going to move into the next stitch and you're going to slip stitch. Now remember, during the slip stitches, you want to make them somewhat loose so that you'll be able to work into them again later on. Okay, so that's 2 stitches. Now we go into the next stitch and we go back to doing single crochets again. So it's a single crochet and then a slip stitch. Okay, so we've got 4 stitches completed. We need to repeat this 2 more times. We need a single crochet and a slip stitch. So now we have 6 stitches worked, and now we need 1 more set. We need a single crochet and a slip stitch. Okay, just like that. So you can start to see it's creating a little bit of a different texture. So we've got 8 stitches, and so now we're coming to our first corner, and that is the 9th stitch. So in the next stitch, we're going to create a corner. So what we're going to do is in the very next stitch, you're going to insert your hook. You're just going to single crochet, chain 2, and go back into that same corner and single crochet. So we're just going to keep our corners as regular single crochets. So you're just going to notice it's going to jut out a wee bit. So see how it's already creating a shape? Just like that. So this is the front panel, or the front of the cardigan. Now we're going to work up the side of the armhole. So how many stitches do we need for our armhole? So we've just completed this 8. We need 12. So we're going to work up 12. Now remember, our crunched single crochet stitch requires 2 stitches. So we know we need 6 sets of that repeat to give us our 12 stitches. So into the next stitch right there, we begin again. We single crochet, and then we slip stitch. Okay, so I'm going to do this for a total of 6 sets. Okay, so I've done my next 6 sets of that crunch stitch, and so I have a total of 12 stitches. So now into the next stitch, we're working our next corner. So I'm going to refer back to here. So we've done 8, now we've done 12, and into the corner, the next stitch is going to be a corner. So remember, we go into the next stitch, we single crochet, chain 2, oops, and single crochet back into that same stitch. Okay, so now you can see it's squaring itself off. Now we're ready to work across the back. So remember, the number of stitches that goes across the back is 18. So now that means we have, remember, we have 2 stitches to create our crunched single crochet. So we need 9 sets of that stitch to give us our 18. So then we go again, single crochet, and slip stitch. You know what to do. You're going to do this for 9 sets. Okay, we've completed our 18 stitches, and you know what happens next. We're creating our next corner. So we've now done one front panel, armhole, the back, and now we're going to do the next armhole in the front panel. So you should pretty much be well versed on what happens next. Into the next stitch, we're going to create a corner, single crochet, chain 2, and then single crochet back into that corner. Okay, and now we just repeat what we did on the other side. So we're going to go down the other side, so it's 12 stitches. So that's 6 sets of those, of that crunch stitch. Into the corner, in the next stitch, you're going to create a corner, and then you're going to do the final 8 stitches across. So I'm going to leave you to finish that, and I'll meet up with you when you've completed row number 2. Okay, so row number 2 is complete for me, and if I were to place my work down, you can see now that the yoke has taken shape. So we've got our corners here. So that is our back. These are going to be our armholes, and these are our 2 front panels. Okay, from here on out, it's going to be nice and easy. You're just going to keep building on this now, and you're going to keep going until you get your chest measurement. So what eventually happens is this gets folded like this, and that is your opening here. Now I realize it's still hard to see that, but eventually that's what we want to do. And you're going to keep doing as many rows as you need until you get that chest measurement, and that's where that chest measurement is important. So for me, it's 18 inches, but remember that measurement is all the way around. So when your work lies flat, it's going to be half of that. So I know I'm going to need 9 inches, okay, or 22.25 centimeters, okay? We'll get to that in a second. Let's take you on to row number 3, just to give you the hang of it. So now, once you've created the shape of your yoke, the rest is now really, really easy to keep building up. So, by the way, you should have noticed that you ended with a slip stitch. You always want to end with a slip stitch. That's why we have an even number of stitches, which works out perfect. So you will always begin by chaining 1, turn your work, and right into that first stitch, which was a slip stitch, you're going to work a single crochet. Now what you want to do is you want to work actually into the back loop of that slip stitch. Okay, so this is the front loop and that's the back loop. So we're just going to insert there, and you're going to place a single crochet. Into the next stitch, you're going to slip stitch, which actually happens to be a single crochet in the previous row. So here what you want to do is you actually want to go into the full stitch. Okay, just like that. See, you're picking up 2 loops, and you're going to slip stitch there. So it's very simple what we're doing. It just takes some concentrating as to where you're placing your hook. So that is going to be in the back loop. So one stitch you go into the back loop and you single crochet. Nice and easy like that. And then into the next stitch, you're going to slip stitch into the full stitch. So you're just going to help it along there like that. And whoops, slip stitch. And you're going to do that until you get to your next corner. So I know I'm going to go into the back loop. So that's why the slip stitches, you don't want them to be too tight because it'll make it tricky for you to get in there. Single crochet, and then we're going to go into the full stitch here, and we're going to slip stitch. So we should still be working our way up to 8 stitches. But as you progress, your stitch count will increase with each round because of our corners. So there's a single crochet, and then there is a slip stitch. Whoops. That was supposed to be a slip stitch. So pretty much you've got that there. Okay, so I've got my 8 stitches. Now you can really see the textures coming through. So now I have a corner I'm going to work into. So into each corner, you just keep building up the corner as usual. So see, there's that chain 2 space. So you're just going to insert your hook. You're going to place a single crochet as you did before, chain 2, and single crochet again. Okay, and that maintains the integrity of the shape, just like that. And now you continue on as you did before. So you will begin by single crocheting into the back loop only. And then you are going to slip stitch into the next stitch. So it always starts with a single crochet and then a slip stitch. And that's pretty much it. So then I find the back loop of the next single crochet and then go into the full stitch where I'm going to slip stitch. Okay, so you're just going to repeat that. Look at how lovely that texture is already. So you're going to repeat that all the way to the next corner, and then inside that chain 2 space you're going to place a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Then you continue with the crunched stitch, single crochet crunched, corner, continue, corner, continue. And that is pretty much it. You should always end up with a slip stitch. Now, if you happen to end up with a single crochet, it's not the end of the world, but you want to maintain that order because that is part of the reason of what gives you that lovely texture. Okay, so row 3, you're now going to repeat it for as many rows as you need until you reach the chest measurement once you are able to fold this down. So once you create, your work is going to build out this way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold that down. So that's now your neck opening, or your armholes there. And then take your measuring tape. And I know I need 18 inches. So my width needs to be 9 inches. Okay, so that's the width of my cardigan. So that's where I'm going to stop when I fold it over. Okay, so I'm going to meet up with you once I've created the full yoke and I'm ready to close up my armholes. Okay, so I have completed 21 rows. So I now have something that looks like this. Actually, I should show you. It actually looks like this. Okay, so you've got your neck hole here and top part of your cardigan is flaring out. So now what you would do is you're going to fold this in half so that these two sides meet. And this is essentially where we're going to create our armholes. Now these armholes might seem a little large, but remember I'm making mine for 12 months, the sizing. So just so you're aware. Okay, so now it's time to actually solidify our armholes. So this is now where we're going to attach each side, and then we'll just be able to continue on creating the rest of the body. So I'm going to take you through that. So this will now be row number 22. And keep in mind, if you are using a medium 4-weight yarn, you may do less rows than I do. And actually, I should have done this, sorry. So how do I know that I'm ready to close off my armholes? Well, I know because I have that chest measurement. Remember, around the chest, I'm going for 18 inches. So once I kind of feel like I've had enough, I've done enough rows, I'm going to fold that in half. Then I'm going to take my measuring tape and I'm just going to measure across here from one side to the other. And I have just a little under 9 inches there. Okay, so remember 9 times 2 is 18. And if you're working on metric, that would be 22 centimeters or 44 for the whole circumference. So I'm happy with that. And so that's how I know, okay, I'm ready to stop with the increases here and now create the armholes. So let's get started with that. Okay, so to begin, I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work as usual. So I'm still going to work this side as usual until I get to my very first corner. So just go ahead and do that, and I will meet up with you when you have reached that corner, and I'll take you through how to connect your armholes. Okay, so I've just come to the very end, just before that little chain 2 space that we normally work into to create a corner. So what I'm going to do is, since my last stitch was a slip stitch, I'm just going to do a single crochet, but I'm not going to chain 2. I'm just going to now meet up with my next corner. So if I go all the way around here, I'm going to meet up with my next corner. And I'm just going to single crochet into that chain 2 space. So there it is right there. And I'm going to single crochet into that. And now you've connected your 2 sides. Some people would do a chain 1. And if I felt that the armhole was a bit narrow, I would give a little chain 1 just for a little bit of extra give. But I feel pretty happy with that. So that is how you create the first attachment there. So now you actually have an armhole. And now I'm going to proceed to stitch all the way across the back as usual. And then I will do the same to attach to the other side. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my way across the back as usual. So since I've done a single crochet, my next stitch is now going to be a slip stitch. And I'm going to continue working that crunched single crochet across, just as we've done. Don't you just love that texture? Love it. And I'll meet up with you at the next corner. Okay, so I've come up to my next corner here. So that's the corner space. So I'm just going to work a single crochet into that. And then I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to skip this whole side here. And I'm just going to go immediately into the next corner space. So there's my chain 2 space. And I'm just going to insert and single crochet into that. Okay, and there's your next armhole. Okay, and now I'm just going to continue working my way across to the end here. Just doing the usual single crochet and slip stitch. Okay, so go ahead and just finish to the other end, and then we'll talk about what will happen for subsequent rows. Okay, so I have completed row number 22, and now you can see the sides are attached. And I now have 104 stitches all the way around for row 22. As always, if your yarn weight is different than mine, your stitches will vary. That's why I always say the most important thing is stick to your measurements. All we're now going to do is we're now going to continue creating the rest of the body before we come back and actually crochet these sleeves, okay? So the idea now is that you're just going to crochet all the way across, chain one, turn, and come all the way back. This, I'm just going to take you through this first row of this section. So this will be row 23. And I'm just going to take you through how to navigate going over this first little kind of join here. Some people have a little bit of a challenge with it. If you're more experienced, then you can just zip on through. You know exactly what to do. But for those of you that are a little bit newer, or if this is your first cardigan, I am going to take you through it. So we're just going to chain one and turn our work, and we are going to stitch up as usual. So I always start with that single crochet. So this part is the same. You're just going to stitch as usual all the way till you get here, and I'll meet up with you here in that last stitch before this space here, and we'll talk about how to crochet across that. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end here, and I've just done a single crochet, and so now I'm going to slip stitch into the actual last stitch. Okay. And so the next stitch is a single crochet, so I would slip stitch into there. But because there's a little space here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to single crochet into the space. Just like that. Okay, and then I'm going to continue on to the next stitch and slip stitch as usual. Whoops. So now this is creating a more solid line so that you can just stitch across. So the next time you come around here, now you'll have an actual stitch to work into, and you can just keep on your merry way. Now, some people, I'm just going to take this out. Some people, because I didn't chain one, they may just jump across and go right away into the next stitch here, just like this. And that's perfectly acceptable as well. The only issue is because our stitch pattern requires 2 stitches and they have to alternate, this is why I chose to go into the space, because now you've got 2 single crochets next to each other. And remember, what helps us create this texture is the alternating action or the alternating stitching of single crochets and slip stitches. So I just did a, sorry, that should have been a slip stitch. If someone was just going to continue on, they would slip stitch and then slip stitch, because this is the stitch I have just done. Ooh, that's a tongue twister. So I've just slip stitched in the last one, so that is why I'm actually going to single crochet into the space, and then I will continue and slip stitch into the next stitch. And this will keep our crunched single crochet stitch consistent with its texture. And that's pretty much it. And then you would continue on, work your pattern across, and once you get to this space, you would do the exact same thing. So you would slip stitch, single crochet into the space, slip stitch, and then continue on your merry way there. And by the way, sometimes depending on the increases in your corners, you may have actually ended off sometimes with a single crochet at the end instead of a slip stitch. It's not the end of the world. All you would do is chain one, turn as usual, and if a single crochet was the last thing you did, then just begin with a slip stitch. Remember, the main goal is to continuously alternate the stitches. So now you're just going to continue working this row back and forth and work the body of your cardigan until you get the length that you desire. Now this is where that back to waist measurement comes in handy. And my back to waist measurement was 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. So that means, so I'm going to fold that down there. I am now going to keep crocheting this row back and forth until I get a total length of 7.5 inches. Now that is going to be from the neck down. That's why it's called back to waist. So the back begins at the base of the neck. And so my cardigan will go till right about there. So this is the chunk that I'm going to now create. So for those of you on metric, that is 19 centimeters, okay? So that is where you're measuring from. So it will be a while now before you and I meet again. So go off and crochet the rest of your body. Once you're done that, you will fasten off, and then we're going to talk about crocheting our sleeves. And that concludes part 1 of the Little Darling cardigan. For part 2, make sure to click on the video icon in the screen here to conclude working on your Little Darling's cardigan. In part 2, we'll take you through the bottom trim, the sleeves, the collar, and the inner trim. You're almost there, guys. So I'll see you in the next video.